All right, in a previous video I covered kind of creation of REST card objects and the ability to kind of include them in like your search result list to basically show, say, ServiceNow content along with, say, content from Kaleo or an external web service to bring in and kind of federate into. So one thing we've done with 4.2, we've also made a connection to SharePoint, and specifically SharePoint Online or Office 365, basically the ones that use the Azure cloud for the offering of SharePoint content. So I'm going to show you kind of how that works in terms of defining connections to SharePoint and then kind of adding SharePoint into your federated list of results here. So first of all, I do need to log into azure.portal.com, and that's going to take me to, I'll show you here in a minute, or portal.azure.com. It's going to take me to, and this is disclosure, so it depends on your setup in your Azure area in terms of whether or not you as an individual have rights to create these records. You may need to involve a global administrator from your Microsoft Azure Cloud kind of administration group to do at least, if not all of it, part of the activities. And I'll kind of talk to where we get to that the part as well. So where I'm going to go here, and there's really a couple of things I need to do to set up, and then also some attributes I need to capture in my notes as part of this. So if I go to Azure Active Directory, what I want to do is I want to create what is called an application registration. And rather than create one, I've already created one. But basically, I've defined ServiceNow demo. The URL you can set to your ServiceNow instance, so it doesn't really matter because the way we're connecting is we're not actually doing a URL-based kind of trust, so it's not required. Now, the first piece of information you're going to need from here is when you define this, you're going to get what's called an application ID. This is one thing you want to copy, and this is where you want to put in kind of your notes as part of your client ID. Right. So then the other thing is you go into here, and then you can also see you have application ID here as well. The rest of this is fine. The reply URL is typically to set that to the same instance. Then the next key part, I guess before I get here, is that you want to generate an access key. So I've already generated this, but this is going to build basically a one-time token or a one-time token that they're going to just reveal to you. You'll want to copy that. You'll note that as kind of your client secret. So that's the second piece of information. The third thing you're going to do in setting this up is you're going to want to connect and basically connect to Office SharePoint Online. And I'll show you in here, you're going to go through where they have delegated permissions. And for ease, what I did is I just checked them all. I'm sure we could have just certain ones on and off. And the thing you'll notice with this is there's an area where it has requires admin. What this means is not a SharePoint admin, but a global admin within Azure needs to be the one to actually grant these permissions. If you were to set these up, check them all, save it, which is fine, you'll come in here and click grant permissions. If you don't have rights as a global admin for those ones that require global admin, you're going to get a failure. So you want, you can settle, chances are you'll be able to set all this up and then go to your global admin and say, grant admin or grant permissions for this particular application. So basically what's kind of happening is we're defining in essence a user inside of your Azure cloud environment that's getting access or being granted access to connect through web services to these different, in this point, SharePoint resource point. So the last piece of information we need is what's called a tenant, which is really your directory information, or like in my case, Evergreen Systems as a directory. What is that ID? To find that, you can go to the same Azure Active Directory, and then there's a properties section. Under there, you'll find a directory ID. This is what we label as the tenant ID. So, and then the last thing you're going to need for connections is you're going to want to log in and password. So some sort of, chances are like a service account you want to use to be the one that actually is establishing the connection, kind of running the searches. And then you'll notice as I get further in here, this part will cover running the searches, but then the actual clicking on the content to see the details of those returned search results is still going to go to the actual logged in user to authenticate and see that content natively as themselves. All right, so from here, let's go to my portal settings. And there are properties you can set just by going to the system properties area, but one thing that we've done is if I add SharePoint to my search results here and I save this, what you'll find is that this settings page is going to add kind of a new tab for me for SharePoint. So SharePoint kind of has its own settings section, and by adding it to kind of the card objects, it's exposing that section of properties as part of this this page. So here's where I'm going to go, and I'm going to add my tenant ID. I'm going to add my client ID. My client secret is going to go here. Now my resource path, in my case, this is going to differ based on you, but chances are it's going to be something like your company.sharepoint.com. In essence, where I'm connecting to from a SharePoint end user or a SharePoint endpoint to search and get content results. And then I'm going to put in my username. This is again going to be what's used to actually bind the connection. So you probably want a service account. Chances are something that doesn't password doesn't change as often as normal users, or else you have to come in here and make those adjustments. All right, so I'm going to save my properties. And now I'm just going to kind of clear my cache here, and I'm going to run my search. And notice now, as I do my search results, I've got, if I do show all, you see there's some ServiceNow content kind of showing up at the top. You'll see it is kind of federated in with our SharePoint content. The highest rank score we got back from SharePoint is 27, then we got some higher ranking scores of relevancy back from ServiceNow knowledge content, which are showing up ahead. But if I just hone in on just the SharePoint results, you'll see I've got various results in here kind of for email. All right, so let me just run a different search just where I can kind of get where I know SharePoint content's going to kind of show up higher up in the list. So at this point, it's basically making a connection to SharePoint through web services, grabbing that information, federating it in. Right, so there's my SharePoint contact. If I look for just knowledge content, I get knowledge content as well. Now, when I go to look at these documents, right, so this is where it's going to take me to directly to SharePoint. If I'm already logged in, as I am, since I logged in through the portal, it's going to, I'm going to bypass any additional login prompt and be taken straight to that document that I'm connecting to. If I wasn't authenticated, I'd have to log in personally as myself, see the content that's out there. So in this case, that was a PDF document, so I can see that directly natively. A zip file is going to have me kind of download that file kind of in this separate window, and then I can open that file. And same would work for like an Excel or Word that I'm not rendering directly within the browser. So that's kind of how that works. Let me quickly show you. Also, one thing I'll highlight here, if I were to leave, come back and run this same exact search again, you'll notice it comes back a little faster than the last time. And part of that is we do use some caching. So if I run the same search within the 24-hour period, we're not making multiple calls back to the REST web service of SharePoint to get that content or get that search results. So just to show you a little bit where this is, so if I go to card objects, let's show what this record looks like. So in here is really kind of the meat of connecting to SharePoint and getting that content. So just we have our own little script util called SharePoint Helper that's basically going out and connecting to SharePoint to get the tokens, kind of handling a lot of the mapping and other kind of components. So the first part is getting this token, which is an authorization token, using those properties. Once I have a token, we apply that token to every REST call to the search as kind of part of that header. And then this part here is kind of capturing what I've inputted into the search page as a search string filter. What's my term I'm searching for? And you'll notice we're kind of passing that down over to this particular search. Now, one thing I'll highlight here is there are other, if you were to look at the SharePoint Web Service API, there are other ways to add additional filters. So if you want to, say, restrict the search to a specific kind of path, for example, you can do things like this. Inside this search, you can do things like path : HTTPS Evergreen sys.sharepoint.com/sitex. Right, so this would then basically apply an additional filter. So it'd be search for your term, but then also apply this filter where you're only searching on a specific path. And you can do things like or path : XXX if you want to have it search just targeted multiple specific kind of paths or specific sites within SharePoint. All right, so there's some options there, and there's a deeper, if you were to go to the SharePoint Web Service API, there's a lot of deeper ways of tuning or controlling the different query kind of parameters that you want to put in here. But so then the other thing I'll highlight here, so there's this REST cache key. So it's taking basically what our built URL is, so the endpoint plus the kind of parameters and query text. This is what we're using as kind of the key for storing what were the results, so that when I run that same search again, it's going to pull those back in. And the rest of this, there is a kind of collection processing script, which basically is kind of an override for when we get results back, how do I want to parse and process those particular results. And a lot of it is that we have, we get back dates, we get back integers, and there's an element of kind of converting some of that into ServiceNow attributes that we can then use. Here's the attributes at the bottom for using the server storage or the caching. The age, this is in minutes, so it's basically a day. And then any of the attributes we get back from the web service, we can map to kind of common attributes. And this allows us to have it kind of in a federated sense across our knowledge content, catalog items, and now SharePoint content can all kind of be represented in one list using kind of a common set of attributes. Other last point just to highlight, so you will see there is this X weight or rank. I kind of showed that the default search or default sort of the search results is based off of the weight or the rank of those things. This is directly, we're passing at this point directly what we get back from SharePoint. If you want to massage it so that SharePoint is higher or lower, you could end up writing a script here to say take rank and multiply it by 10 or add 10 to it or subtract it, make it so that other things weight higher than others. But that's basically how you'd want to manipulate or manipulate how it shows up in the list based off of the ranking. So that kind of covers what I meant to show in terms of adding SharePoint to the search results. Hope this is helpful, and thank you for your time.